technology tends to go through a 25-year adoption cycle.
And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
Is the creator of the Silk Road and had 2 life sentences. Ross is praised by the libertarian crypto community. Trump is now appealing to the crypto crowd for votes. This is a sign that crypto is so large that it can't be ignored.
The Federal Reserve is engaged in a pilot project that looks at how distributed ledger technology can be used to improve efficiency of cross-border payments and settlements involving multiple currency. This is occurring in coordination with other G7 countries, which are also engaged in similar projects to speed up and lower the cost of doing business around the world. Furthermore, all G20 countries are doing the same, and making the United States the only country on the planet to ban a CBDC is just unthinkable. But let me repeat that the only country to prohibit a CBDC would be what Representative Emmer's isolationist bill would do in stopping this testing in its tracks. They would undercut America's commitment to its allies and seriously impair our ability to influence the standards adopted by other nations as we forge ahead with CBDC. All I'm saying is this, if I may, and that is, we don't want to be seen as a country that's not futuristic enough to at least look at it, to explore it, to test, to find out. Right now, we're the only country that is proposing, any of our members proposing a ban. All I'm saying is, let's not stop what the Fed is doing in trying to do.
Maxine Waters says that she wants the Fed to continue what it's doing. So the Fed is going to continue to research central bank digital currencies and develop things while the politicians argue if they should or shouldn't have it. But the Fed is getting ready to issue them regardless. So it's very revealing. However, if the politicians decide not to allow central bank digital currencies in the United States, what's going to fill that gap? Because the rest of the world, like she said, G7 countries are exploring cross-border payments and the biz is exploring CBDC designs. So what is the United States going to use when the system becomes tokenized?
Down is global central banks stopped buying U.S. Treasury bonds 10 years ago on a net basis. And U.S. debt has not stopped growing. And so there is, and not only has it not stopped growing, it's growing exponentially. And so there's a widening gap between supply of U.S. Treasury bonds and demand from global central banks. And that gap is being filled by the global private sector. And then when we have run into periods where there is insufficient demand from the global private sector for those bonds, which manifests as a stronger dollar and U.S. Treasury market dysfunction. The Fed and or Treasury inject dollar liquidity, and they've done so multiple times at an accelerating pace, accelerating in intervals over the last 4 to 5 years. And when they do so, it's good for all the asset classes and nominal GDP and inflation and employment.
Before we continue the show, I'd like to take a moment to thank Incogni. Incogni is the sponsor of this show, and what they offer is a solution that reaches out to data brokerages and asks to have your information removed from their databases. You see, under law, if you specifically ask a data brokerage to remove your data, they're required to. So Incogni automatically reaches out to every single data brokerages on your behalf and is constantly updating their list of new data brokerages. You're able to do this by yourself for free, but it takes up a large amount of time. So for as little as $5.19 a month, you can let Incogni do the work for you. But you see, data brokerages could be very harmful because they have revealing information like your date of birth, your email addresses, your phone numbers, and sometimes your last 4 digits of your social. And this allows scammers to take out loans and try to mess up people's credit. So, data brokerages have been hacked in the past, and they've simply just sold data to scammers in the past. So, it's important to stay up on your privacy online. And if you use my link incogni.com/Darren, you can receive up to 60% off the annual plan. So, be sure to check them out.
That I just mentioned. And I think what we're seeing increasingly are markets reflexively beginning to understand that treasury market dysfunction will not be allowed on a sustained basis, in which case you've got a $130 trillion global bond market increasingly squeezing into the $65 trillion US dollar equity market, the roughly $14 trillion gold market, and the $1.4 trillion Bitcoin market. And so when you look at charts of S&P 500 over the long bond, it is spiking. When you look at the NASDAQ over the long bond, it is spiking. Gold over the long bond, spiking. Bitcoin over the long bond, spiking. All of these spikes have happened in the last 18 to 24 months. And I think those are signs of the market recognizing, the bond market starting to recognize that on a real basis, it is the sucker at the card table. The bubble is in long-term US Treasury bonds. And the way that is resolved is by moving into things that will better hedge inflation. And I think that's what we've been watching and will continue to see over the course of this
Debt
year.
is out of control, and that's what the Treasury market represents. Every time the government borrows, they issue treasuries, and they're simply running out of buyers. They certainly will play their games where they make the banks buy treasuries, but when the market gives out, it's going to happen quick. And the regulators are reactionary, not proactive. So sit back and watch the show. The bond market is massive, and when it breaks down, a new system will arise, and the central bankers are preparing for this with global ledgers that incorporate everything, including crypto.
If we don't start the dialogue between economists and technologists, it is hard to see how useful financial innovation can really move forward. We have labeled our vision for the future financial system the Finternet. I will leave it to Nandan to expand on it and explain the more technical aspects. But let me provide a broad overview. The Finternet is a vision of multiple financial ecosystems that connect with each other, much like the internet. It aims to empower individuals and businesses by placing them at the center of their financial lives. The application of technology has meant that tasks that were once expensive and time-consuming, like making an overseas phone call or booking an hotel room in an unfamiliar city, can now be done with the flick of a
The
finger.
BIS is talking about the Finternet. The Finternet is a unified ledger that is going to connect all different ecosystems, whether that be walled gardens or open gardens or consortiums, whatever. It doesn't matter. That this unified ledger will be able to connect everything, including crypto assets. Now, why are they creating this open ledger, this unified ledger? Well, they want to police it. If you look at the documentation, they say they need to protect people from frauds and scams, and they need to protect people, and that's why they're creating a unified ledger. But the truth is, they have to adapt because technology can already replace what they're doing. What all banks are doing, what all stock markets are doing. There's no need for these central institutions that are just sucking up the wealth of people and charging enormous fees. There's no need for them anymore. So they're creating systems that are the police of financial systems. They're watching everything and they want to control the center of this. So they're giving the illusion that they're embracing tokenization, but in reality, what they're doing is setting it all up to funnel through their system. There's no need to have a Finternet. These systems are by design open and public, and anyone can access them.
I think gold will stand as the best of that, but Bitcoin and others are going to what are their issues? And we will be in a void as to what that is, because the basic problem is that you can't trust central bankers. I mean, they're all in a bind. They all have too much debt. They all have that bind. So who's going to withstand it? They compete with each other. When one devalues, if the dollar devalues, the others are going to want to devalue because they're going to be uncompetitive. So I think that's the nature of our circumstance.
If you deleted a dollar from the financial system, the whole financial system breaks because every single unit of account needs to be accounted for. And that's all the banks, central banks, everybody is accounting for every single currency unit. So when the Fed is doing QE, when the US government is issuing treasuries, they're devaluing the dollar and everything is pinned against the dollar, so everything else fluctuates in price. And this causes a competition, a race to the bottom.
We want to create a unified approach to the financial system. In other words, this should work in all countries. This should work in all sectors. This should work for all asset classes. It could be bonds, it could be cash, it could be shares, it could be mutual funds, ETFs, gold. I don't know if I can say this in front of central bankers. It could be Bitcoin. Anyway, so the point is that it is essentially neutral or agnostic to the asset classes.
A centralized system of central banks and countries are making a unified, universal, fair, neutral public ledger that everyone can connect to. How is that possible? How are central banks, centralized systems, the BIS, countries going to create a system that doesn't have biases in it? It's impossible. Now, anyone can create their own system parallel to this system. It's not anything new. All crypto assets serve that purpose. You can create a whole financial system on any one of these ledgers. So when the BIS is saying that they're going to police it against fraud and consumer protection, well, what they're saying is that it's not neutral. They're going to sanction certain people that don't comply to their rules and regulations. Now, the United States historically has been the one that has forced these rules. We're seeing the BRICS nations completely branch off and start creating their own system of trades to get away from the US dollar.
I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. I will support the right to self-custody to the nation's 50 million crypto holders. I say this with your vote. I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
When I first entered crypto, something like this would be completely unheard of. Even just politicians talking about CBDCs or crypto assets, it just never happened. We're desensitized to how far we've come. And we're seeing the big picture unravel. You're seeing debt get to historic levels of highs, which at one point it breaks. And where will wealth usher into? Where will it move to? Because wealth can never be destroyed. It just merely moves to different locations. So with everything that's happening, with the BIS creating a universal ledger that's going to interoperate with crypto assets, banks, stock markets, we're seeing partnerships with large institutions and different protocols.
It can also be done over time. This is not a big bang approach where we get up in the morning when we are in this beautiful new world. This could take years to roll out. Different countries, based on their appetite for change, will do it differently. Different sectors will do it differently. The design that we have proposed is completely asynchronous, which allows different people to come onto this thinking at different times.
He says that there won't be a big bang moment. But what he fails to understand is that the big banks, the large financial institutions, the banking software providers, they've all invested a ton of capital into digitizing and upgrading their system. So they're all waiting on the sidelines. They're waiting for the regulator to give the green light. So when the regulator finally gives the green light, it will seem like a big bang moment. But they've been ready and building since 2015.
And the last point is what you mentioned. what is the implications for liquidity? So if you have the systems connected with full access and no gates, would the country be comfortable if its citizen decides one day to remove the money from a bank in Brazil, for example, and open an account in US and buy a CD from a bank in the US and transfer all the money? What if everybody wants to do that at the same time? So those are the things that I think still need to be solved. I think this is more of a governance issue than a technology issue. I think the technology issue is doing pretty well.
It's more of a confidence issue than a technology issue, and there you go. The technology is ready. What he's saying is that when you open up the entire world to have accessibility to any asset, they want to control. They want to make sure that the people in Brazil don't all exit Brazil's economy. He uses the example of the United States, but the United States is doing the same thing as every other country that hyperinflated their currency. So when you have accessibility to any asset, well, it's not going to be the US dollar for very long.
Wrong.
I can comment on what can go wrong. I think a lot of things can go wrong, but not doing anything also can go wrong. And the way technology is advancing and people are finding their own solutions for payment, I guess by not being there, you have a higher risk of going wrong than being
The
there.
name of the game is adapt to survive. That's exactly what the banks are doing. They're changing their entire stance on the digital asset industry because they know that they have to. They have to change their business model in order to survive. And we've been desensitized to the amount of news and the impact of the news that has came out. You see, back 2017, none of this stuff was happening. They were still exploring stuff. They're still saying that it was a fraud, that there's no use case for it, it's garbage. And now they're completely embracing. The BIS is setting up a ledger for tokenized assets to atomically swap. I mean, they're taking on the entire crypto asset model and applying it to the banking system. And even if they don't adopt a specific crypto asset technology, their technology is going to be interoperable with decentralized technologies, and the private sector is going to win. And all currencies are breaking right now. All debt markets are breaking right now. Where is the wealth going to go? It's just going to enter, exit that old system into the new one. So if they build a bridge from their system into the digital asset world, into the crypto world, and then the debt market implodes, well, that's an easy migration for everybody that owns traditional assets to move into the crypto world.
And open an account in US and buy a CD from a bank in the US and transfer all the money. What if everybody wants to do that at the same time? So those are the things that I think still need to be solved. I think this is more of a governance issue than a technology issue. I think the technology issue is doing pretty well.
It's not a technology issue, it's a confidence issue. And he gives the example of Brazilians buying CDs in the US. What if all of them were to do it at the same time? That's their main concern, is that their main concern is when you have a universal ledger, people can choose assets and get out of the currencies that they're in, get out of the currencies quickly. So that's what the central banks mean by it's more of a confidence issue than a technology issue. Technology has to be invented or adopted. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this, please consider joining my Patreon or my ghost site, dmjr.ghost.io. Thanks, guys.